Good morning, everyone. How are you doing today? Please find something to write with and something to write on. Does anybody know what a haiku is? Haiku is a form of Japanese poetry. It's very simple in form. It's only 3 lines. The first line is 5 syllables. The second line is 7 syllables. The third line is 5 syllables. Haiku is not about simplifying. 575 should be longer. If I asked you to do free writing, just write down what you're feeling. How many pages would you write? Haiku is not about simplifying. Haiku is about fully understanding the complete complexity and representing it in a way that is simplicity. So, anybody know The Moral Imagination? Book by John Paul Lederach. John Paul is also the reason I'm addicted to haiku, which is the reason you wrote haiku, so it's really just his fault. I'm going to read you, not the whole chapter, a selection of what he says about haiku. The hardest challenge of peacebuilding is to see the essence. If you do nothing else, take time to get a picture. When you see the picture better, you will have achieved a synthesis. The key to complexity is finding the elegant beauty of simplicity. Haiku, if you let it, will take you on a journey through difficult terrain in search of a place with great promise, but where it is hardly possible to live, except in short, extraordinary moments. It is the place where simplicity and complexity meet. I happen to believe that this is also the place where the heart of peacebuilding pounds a steady, but not often perceived rhythm, and where the source of the moral imagination finds inspiration. The second one, the practice of paradoxical curiosity. Embrace complexity. Get curious about what you don't understand. Get curious about what you don't agree and who you don't agree with. Yesterday morning, we heard him say, I love to hang out with people who don't agree with me. Yeah. Most of us, we walk into the room, we look around. We see the person we don't really want to talk to, we run away and walk to the people we know and like. John Paul says, do the other thing. If you walk into the room, the first person you should talk to is the person you don't want to, the person who's different from you, the person who disagrees with you. The last one is the willingness to risk and to be vulnerable. And I think yesterday morning, second session, we witnessed that fully. That takes a lot of strength. That takes a lot of guts. That takes a lot from the self to do that. Willingness to risk and to be vulnerable. Peacebuilding is a vulnerable space. Being a peacebuilder is a vulnerable profession in many ways. You have to show up that way. What does it mean? What does it look like? I'm going to tell you 2 stories that illustrate this. One is from the book, and the other 2 are from me. The one from the book I'm going to read to you because it's quoted. And in the interest of having people have their own voice, let me tell it to you in his words because he's quoted. So I'll read it. So this one is from Tajikistan, the inter-Tajik war and the mediation process for the inter-Tajik war. This is a professor, Professor Abdul. I was tasked by the government to approach and convince one of the warlords, a key mullah commander located in the mountains, to enter negotiations. This was difficult, if not impossible, because this commander was considered a notorious criminal, and he had killed one of my close friends. When I first got to the encampment, the commander said, I arrived late, and it was time for prayers. So we went together and prayed. When we had finished, he said to me, how can a communist pray? I'm not a communist. My father was. I responded. Then he asked what I taught at the university. We soon discovered that we were both interested in philosophy and Sufism. Our meeting went from an agreed 20 minutes to 2.5 hours. In this part of the world, you have to circle into truth through stories. You see, in Sufism, there is an idea that discussion has no end. I kept going to visit him. We mostly talked poetry and philosophy. Little by little, I asked him about ending the war. I wanted to persuade him to take the chance on putting down his weapons. After months of visits, we finally had enough trust to speak truths, and it all boiled down to one concern. The commander said to me, "If I put down my weapons and go to Dushanbe with you, can you guarantee my safety and life?" My difficulty was that I could not guarantee his safety. So I told my philosopher, warlord friend the truth. "I cannot guarantee your safety, but I can guarantee this. I will go with you, side by side." That day, the commander agreed to meet the government. Some weeks later, we came down together from the mountains. When he first met with the government commission, he told them, "I have not come because of your government. I have come for the honor and respect of this professor." The centrality of relationships, embracing complexity, my philosopher, warlord, friend. Getting curious about those you don't agree with, providing space for the creative act. They talked about poetry and philosophy, and they got peace. And the willingness to risk, to be vulnerable in that space from both sides. He went there, this man had killed his friend. And this man knew when he went to see the government, his security at risk. These four things work together, you see. Let me give you another story happening right now, daily, actually. And this is from two peace activists I work with. They are currently in a conflict situation. I'm not going to identify them. One of them is one of the leaders of the peace movement in that place. They're both young people, by the way. They're your age. And one day, he found on his doorstep an assassin come to kill him. And he said to the man, "Greetings. Won't you sit down? Let us have some tea." And he made tea, and he and his assassin sat on the porch, and they drank their tea and they had a chat for an hour. And at the end of that hour, the assassin looked at him and said, "Yeah, I can't do this. Thanks for the tea. See you later." And left. He's still alive today, by the way. The other one, he gets harassed regularly by security forces. They come in their cars, their trucks and everything, all fully geared up with all the weapons, to his home, to his community. And then they bang on his door, and then they interrogate him, and they pressure him, and they harass him. His response, "Oh, hello, sir. Yes, how are you doing today? Please sit on my porch." We do a lot of porch things, right? And this person loves coffee. And I don't mean coffee, I mean coffee. Coffee. So he invites them. He says, "Please sit on my porch, let me make some coffee." Okay, he makes slow drip, slowly, from the beginning. So he pulls out his equipment. "Please, sir, sit down." "Yes, and you too, yes." So he grabs the beans, grinds them by hand, slowly. Prepares all the instruments, boils the water slowly, puts in the coffee, pours the water. It drips slowly. Have you ever had this kind of drip coffee? It takes forever. This isn't like go grab your coffee on your way to class or work. No. And while he's doing that, they talk. They chat. And then they drink their coffee. They chat. An hour and a half later, they leave. And he does this every time. What happens is he knows them all. He knows all the commanders. He knows all their second in command. And when the community and the security forces have problems, "I know you. You've had coffee on my porch. We can find a solution to this." This is peace building. This is the centrality of relationships. This is embracing complexity of people, getting curious about those you don't know or don't agree with, providing space for the creative act, tea and coffee, food. I told you yesterday, food and peace building. And being willing to risk, being willing to sit there on that porch with some tea and coffee and chat with these people who are threats to you. This is peace building. And it's small, you notice? It's a cup of tea. It's a cup of coffee. And yet it's so big. And it's so effective. John Paul also talks about critical yeast, and this is where the recipe comes in. So let me ask you this. How many people have heard about critical mass? John Paul says, the yeast in bread, it is the smallest ingredient, and it makes the entire thing possible. You have to treat it right. You have to mix it in there properly. You can't just dump it in. It needs the right situation, warmth, moisture. You need to take care of it a bit. You need to mix it properly. And it will actually make everything go, and it's small. Then, when you're making bread, you must prepare, right? You use different kinds of bowls and all the ingredients and everything. When you make bread, at some point your hands get very messy with bread, dough. It is not a good time to reach into your cabinet and get the thing you forgot. It's also not a good time to decide to go do something else because you will have a problem with your timing, you will have a problem with many things, and your hands are full of flour. At the end of me making bread, you should see my phone. It's white. My phone's black. You have to be prepared. You have to prepare for peace building. You can't just say, we're going to do it. You have to prepare. And if you say, we're going to do it because we just got to do something right now, okay, then start and then prepare. So I can mix it up first. That's using a spatula. And then prepare while it's starting. Okay, you need preparation. And I think this has a lot to say for peace building. People will tell you, you hold the future. You are the next generation. Next what? You're now. Literally, you are now. You think, I'm not ready. You never will be ready. Don't let that stop you. You will never feel ready in this life. You will never feel ready in peace building. That's the way it is. So don't let that stop you. Because younger yeast makes better sourdough bread. Peace building's for you. It's for you. And you're going to do it. And you're going to do it in some of the best ways. One of my other mentors, Emma Leslie, peace builder, she says, peace building is the glass half full profession. Join or don't. What does it mean? It means we always have to have hope, and there was some haiku about hope. I love it. Whatever we do, everything we do, we have to do with hope. We have to do it believing that a different and better future is possible. And when you lose that, you're not going to be hopeful or effective as peace builder. We have to hold that hope. It's hard. As you've been hearing a lot about people who have struggled through many terribly difficult things. You've heard a lot about how terrible the state of the world is. And yet, peace builders, we have to stand here with hope that a better and different future is possible and keep working. That's our job. Emma's organization and Emma herself uses an approach to peace building called being in the middle by being on the edge. Peace building we often think about as that foreign person who flies in and fixes everything. No, that's not it. Being in the middle by being on the edge. It's like bread baking. I do things with the dough, right? I knead it, I shape it, I divide it, I let it sit, I let it rise, all that. But what's happening in there is really happening inside, and I cannot see it. It needs me to be on the edge, because otherwise these random ingredients don't become bread. So I can make it so that the environment is optimum to make that excellent bread, or I can mess it up. The next big question, bakers ask themselves is, when is my dough properly proved? So when you make bread, you have to leave it to rise. You may have heard of this. It's called proving. If it's underproved, too little, or overproved, too much, your bread's not going to be that great, and you may be headed for a baking disaster. How do you find the exact moment when this is ready and you bake it? Yeah, well, there are many things that you can look at. Experienced bakers do this by feel, by touch. They know when the bread is ready for each step. They just know. They work with it. They know everything. They're noticing very, very detailed what's going on. How does it smell? How does it look? How does it feel? Feels right, doesn't feel right. I need to add something, more time. They just know by intuition. And in peace building, intuition and experience, also vital. We like to say it's all based on data. Actually, if you talk to peace builders on the ground, they'll say they're relying more on their intuition. People will tell you, don't go with your gut. I would say, do listen to your gut. Use your brain, listen to your gut. It's going to tell you valuable things. And I find this part about intuition is where we get back to haiku in our bread making. John Paul says this about haiku. The core of the practice of haiku is to find your way to intuition, unfettered by logic, explanation, or even emotion. If you want to know the recipe for peace building, I'm going to end by sharing with you a poem from John Paul and one word from me. This is John Paul's poem. Reach out to those you fear. Touch the heart of complexity. Imagine beyond what is seen. Risk vulnerability one step at a time. And from me, you'll never feel ready. So don't let that stop you. Do it anyway.